We'll get started. All right, it's October 7th, 2014, and we're speaking with Lynn Hickson Holley. Can you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and how you came to be a lawyer?
Well, I was born a number of years ago, over 21 now, and I was born in St. Petersburg, Florida. Both my parents were Floridians, and my grandparents were Floridians. They had come down from South Carolina on their honeymoon on the St. Johns River, which was advertised wildly at that time in the 1800s as the best place to go for your honeymoon. They fell in love with it, went back to South Carolina, sold all that they had, and came to Florida. And then on my mother's side, the reason they were in Florida was before the Revolution, they were Tories. They lived here, but they were Tories, and they just couldn't see fighting the mother country. However, they felt that the people were right. So they said, let's leave, let's forget it. So they went to the Caribbean. And when things got a little more stable over here, they were through with the revolution, they entered back and came through Key West. And one of my great uncles was the first municipal judge in Key West. So that's how I got here.
And is it the fact that your uncle was a judge in Key West that led you to become a lawyer?
No, I don't think so. Key West was not. It was pretty wild, I understand, and he was just there. I know he was rabid against alcohol. That's probably why they made him a judge, because he didn't drink. It may have been that I had two uncles who were lawyers. My dad was an engineer, and he said lawyers couldn't add or subtract. And I had trouble with math, so that's one of the reasons.
Now, what years were you in law school?
I graduated in 49.
And tell us what that was like, because there couldn't have been too many women going to law school then.
No, I went to school with the returning GI. There were 3 women and 500 men. I had gone to FSCW, but then it was Florida State College for Women. And I had decided, after looking over the various things that girls were doing to support themselves, I didn't want to become a teacher. I didn't want to become a nurse. And I thought, why don't I do like my uncles and become a lawyer? So I decided, well, I don't want to just become a lawyer. I thought, well, South America is coming into its own. We're getting Spanish-speaking people. There's more travel. There's a lot of commerce. I think I want to become an ambassador. So my plan was to go to law school and then to go to New Orleans to a place called International House, where you could live for a year and just speak the language. And I was going to try to do Spanish and Portuguese. And then I was going to offer myself for my services. However, I fell in love in law school, and that was rapidly changed. I didn't go to the International House. Instead, I went up when I graduated. Bill still had a semester to go because he had returned to school as soon as he got out of the service. So I went up, and my uncles had gotten me a job as an assistant attorney general in Tallahassee. At that time, we didn't have cumulative statutes. So you had to go to each year's statute, like 1919, you would pull those out. 1925, you would pull those out to be absolutely sure. And the legislature decided in 47 that it was going to have a cumulative statutory system. So they hired 5. And I was the one from the University of Florida. There was one from Harvard, one from Yale, one from Miami, and one from the school over on the East Coast, the private law school. Yeah. And so we were the five, too. So we indexed, accumulated all the statutes into one. So that was the first one. So now you just have one set to look into.
We owe that to you and your hard work.
Yes. So when I finished that, then I came to Naples, now South America.
How did you happen to decide to land in Naples?
That's where my husband was from. His dad was down here, had been the first pharmacist in the county. So he thought that Naples was the smartest little town on the West Coast, of course. So we came down here.
And
there is something that happened sort of interesting, though. When I finished up my assignment in the Attorney General's office, I came to Naples. By that time, Bill had graduated. And we had to have the GI Bill to have a house. So the man was interviewing us. John Pulling was a good friend of Bill's and his family. So John built a house for us, and Bob Benson. And so we had to get a GI loan. Well, after the house was built and we were getting ready, we had to get interviewed. And the young man interviewer looked at it, he says, well, I don't know if I can approve this. He said, 2 lawyers just starting out. He said, one of you is going to have to get a real job. So I was the one selected to get the real job. So I went to work for Bob Cohn's bookkeeping with the fish company down on the river. So that was my first, that's where I learned what credit and debit meant.
And how long was it then before you started practicing law?
Oh, it was about 3 years, because I had to keep my real job for a pretty good time until enough money was generated.
What did you do when you first started practicing law?
I joined my husband in his practice, was the first thing that I did.
How did that work out?
That worked out fine, because at that time we were the only lawyers in Naples. Even the lawyer for the city council was from Fort Myers and drove down for the city council meetings. So after a time then, Bill talked me into, they needed the local boy. They didn't need to pay somebody from Fort Myers. So he was their first city attorney here, but we were the only 2 lawyers practicing. There was a lovely man named George Davis, who was from Georgia. He was retired, but he had a sometime office up in, I remember we went to a 2nd floor of some building when I met him. And he was not really here to practice. He bought the land for where Davis Boulevard is. But he was a lovely, lovely person. But they had nobody else to go to, that's why.
So what sorts of things did you do for people when you were a new lawyer?
They even they wanted us both to represent them in divorces. And we explained that just would not do. But we would reach an agreement if they wanted to. We had all kinds of we did everything. We did have an offer from the Seminole tribe. Bill and I had an argument over that. They approached us through Doug Henry and had him come and ask us. They wanted to join in and have this lawsuit, you know, for the treaty and everything, to sign it between us, but they had to bring a lawsuit. And I thought it would be great sport and great learning chance and really fun to do it. And Bill says, no, that we won't have time for anything else. And we'll starve while we're waiting to get paid, because there won't be any money till the end of the suit. So that was one argument I remember.
Um, there could not have been too many women lawyers at the time. But do you have a sense of how many there were around the state?
Well, I do know, we were in the 19th Circuit. The 20th Circuit did not exist then. And when I came down, Bill did, we were at the 19th Circuit, reached from Sarasota all the way down through that corridor over to Miami. And I was the only one, to the best of my knowledge, I was the only woman practicing between Sarasota and Miami. As a matter of fact, there was the Women's Bar Association that started just before I graduated or just afterward, and to try to bring all the women together. And there were maybe over the state, there must have been 25 or 30 of us. And I went over sometime, whenever I went to a seminar, they usually had a meeting. I would go to the meeting then. And they said, now, Lynn, we're going to depend on you to bring in all the gals from Southwest Florida. And I said, well, I accept, and I am showing you who it is. I said, I'm it. So I didn't bring too many to the fore, so I quit.
Do you recall about how long it was before more lawyers appeared in Naples?
The next lawyer that came full time was Walter Sarcone, and he came from Miami, and he came.
And was that good for business?
Yes, it was, because people had an opponent. It was good for business.
What was your office like when you first started out?
It was behind the Rexall drugstore, and the Rexall drugstore is now a pizza place, I think. It's the corner of 5th Avenue South and 8th Street. The City Hall was also on 8th Street. And the man who owned the building built the offices for us. Oh, our first office was John had a real estate office, and his partner had an insurance office at the other side of the building. They built on 5th Avenue, which was right across where Ben Park's office eventually came to town and had one. And they built us an office in back of their office. And that was the first office. But I wasn't in there because I was out at Bob Combs Fish Company keeping books. So after, when I joined Bill, is when the office was moved to right in back of that. We had to have a full library, though.
You did?
We spent $10,000 for a library, because you had to go to Miami, or you had to go to Fort Myers, and there were no computers. So a lot of people used our library.
How long did it take to assemble a library?
Oh, not long at all. Book companies love to sell big volumes. They send salesmen down who are very experienced to tell you everything that you need.
How long were you actively in practice?
Well, let's see. I started in 1949. My first case at all was for my family in St. Petersburg. My aunt, whose husband had died, and she'd remarried. And back then, a woman could not sell her individual property without her spouse's approval. And she did, it was all her first husband's, and she wanted to manage her own property. And there was something called a free dealer, and so she wanted to become a free dealer. So that was my first experience into a real, acting as a real lawyer to make my aunt a free dealer. Also, it might be of interest to you that it was just a few years before I started law school before a woman could become partner with her husband.
Really?
Yes. Yes. Not a corporate thing, but a partner. You could not be a partner they changed that in the Florida legislature shortly before I went to law school.
And
but that was my first case. And I think my last case is now, I have a cousin from D.C. who lived up there after he got out of the service and entered the Navy as a ship design section and spent his entire life there. He got Alzheimer's, and he had asked me, his Virginia lawyer had asked me if he wanted to put me down to handle things if something happened to him. And I said, sure, not realizing I might. Well, I did have to do it. And I have started that in '49 as his guardian, and I moved him to Florida. And that, I think, is going to be my last case, because he died in 2012 in December. So my first and last case has been for my family.
Spanning from 1949 to 2012.
No,
No. Oh.
no, we haven't closed it yet.
Oh,
It's still open. So you do the math.
so eventually that will be your last case.
That will be my last case.
How has the practice of law changed since you started?
Radically. When I went to law school, we started with the common law pleading, and we went through all those rules and the agony of it all. And then while I was in law school, they changed it to the criminal laws of procedure and the civil laws of procedure. And that was so much easier. So much easier. I'm not sorry I had common law pleading, because you understand why they're doing these things in the pleading rules. It helps you a lot, really, to zero in a little more on the issue, too, about what something is. But they put everything in your, in equity, it was a declaration. They had the equity side of the court and the law side of the court. And then with the rules of civil procedure, the rules of criminal procedure, all that changed. So it did simplify quite a lot. It was helpful. I liked it.
What was, after a few more lawyers got to town, what was the atmosphere among lawyers? And was it a collegial group, or how did it play out?
It was a very collegial group. Very. Sarah Cody came, Walter came, and we were happy to see him. And then I think Ben Parks came. And then, Toby Carroll came then. And we had been here a number of years. Then Toby brought in Brown. Remember Brown? Brought in Brown. He brought in Smith, Harold Smith. Harold was in Collier County when we came. Harold Smith, Dick Stanley, and I were all in law school together. Okay, Harold got out of law school first. He was hired by the Collier Corporation, and went immediately from there to Everglades City. And he and his wife lived in Everglades City. And he then became the school board attorney, the county commission attorney, he was their attorney. Okay. So he was down there when we came here. But then Toby, after a number of years here, brought Smith in. And after Harold came here, Stanley came. And but he was in Immokalee. Dick liked to hunt and fish, and that came first, and then he practiced. And but everybody was very helpful, very collegial, very welcoming. It was I thought it was a good, wholesome atmosphere. As a matter of fact, it was almost a crime among us if you said you were going to do something legally for your client. Your word was kind of your bond. We'd have telephone calls to reach agreements. Let me talk with client. Yes, it says okay. and without a written word. It could be followed out, and it was a good. You shook hands on it. That was it. It was your word was your bond. It was very good if you came to town and there was a big telephone thing. So and so this lawyer came to town, and you know what? He backed out. He wants everything in writing now. He backed out. It's different. The way he sent over what he wrote is different from what we. That traveled very fast in our group, and so we started then complaining about having to put all this into writing was adding to the client's cost and plus our trouble. So along that line then, lawyers, of course, from other areas were much more seasoned than we were, we in our group, and they had learned, I guess, that it was best to have it in writing. So the lawyers from Orlando that would come in, the lawyers from Tampa, and particularly Miami, they wouldn't do anything unless it was in writing, because you could not bank on the majority of what they said in their word. I don't know if they handled so many cases they forgot what they were doing, but you really could not bank on all of them remembering what it was. So we talked about doing it the Miami way, or the local way. Along with that time, we had our county judge was Judge Jolly, that Jolly Bridge was named after. He was a very, very good county judge. He was not a lawyer, but he was very, very, very good. Everybody was pleased with Judge Jolly. He was kind of everybody's friend, too. And we were down at Everglades, I recall, one time on a case. Judge Jolly was sitting as county judge. Some Miami lawyer was on the other side, and he had brought some books over with some cases about the case, and he was telling the judge, I want to show you these cases. Says it really is the opposite of what they're saying here. I want to show you these cases. Judge Jolly looked at him and he says, put those away. He says, we do everything according to Hoyle here. We do it right. So that's where our saying came in, we do everything according to Hoyle here, which of course is a game book. Hoyle wrote the book of how to play games. But in his view, when we did it according to Hoyle, that was the right way. Forget these books.
Do you remember who the second woman lawyer was to come to town?
I think, I believe it was to Collier County. I think it was Brenda. Do you remember? I think it was Brenda.
Probably was.
Brenda Garrison?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Brenda was the second woman to come to town.
Do you have a most memorable courtroom experience?
A couple.
How about?
She become judge.
Yeah. Before you became judge or after?
Okay. My first case that I had, that was in St. Petersburg, and of course that's a big county, I laid out everything, step by step by step. Named all my aunt's properties and everything, and I thought I had done an A-plus job. We were in the courtroom, and the judge says, young lady, I would like to see you in chambers. I thought, what have I done wrong here? So shivering in my boots, I went in and I sat down. I said, yes, Judge. And he says, I want to ask you several questions. He said, what is it that makes you want to do something different from other women and become a lawyer? And he says, explain that to me. I was so glad he wasn't going to hold me in contempt of court. I would have explained anything to him. And I thought for a second. I said, well, I have two uncles that were lawyers, and on court days in Alachua County, that's where they held court in our county seat. So my grandmother always had all the lawyers, both for and against, the out-of-town lawyers, for dinner. And she did. And I remember they would all sit around the table at grandmother's house and have lunch together, and then go back to the courtroom. And I remember specifically very well, though, that I would always drop by grandmother's all those days because the desserts were always better. She prepared a better dessert for that day. So, but that is my one memorable experience. And I explained to the judge, after I got myself together, I said, well, Judge, women are nurturers. We nurture babies, husbands, we're the nurses, the school teachers. And I said, the legal system can use a lot of nurturing. And I said, in divorces, at times of death, when there's probate, if somebody goes to prison, the one who's left, I said, it just needs some nurturing. And I said, it just, on top of my grandmother's experience as a child every time the court came to town, and also my experience with the lawyers, I decided to become a lawyer. And he said, now where are you from? I said, Naples. And he relaxed. He said, oh, I love the fishing down there. How is it? So I encouraged him to talk about fishing, and I left. So that's the answer to that question.
That's a great answer. At some point, you became a judge. Can you tell us about that?
Well, they needed me. We had a small claims judge, and a very, very bright judge, but I think he used it as a ploy of strength by telling the county commission, unless something happened or whatever it is, that he resigned. So they had no small claims judge then. And the one who was the attorney for the county commission came to me and said, the commission have talked it all over, and we would like to invite you to become the small claims judge. And he told me what the pay would be, and I liked that, and I would have the place out at the courthouse. And so I said, fine. So you could, of course, practice and so forth. We do. The next thing I knew, the attorney for the county commission, after I did this for, 4 or 5 months, I guess, I thought, well, this is pretty good. He comes in to me and puts down, he says, we just got a special act passed in the legislature I need to tell you about, because it's going to increase your work. The jurisdiction had been raised to over $5,000. And he says, you're going to be handling all those cases. So it really increased. So if anything under 5,000, or they could get down to 5,000, I heard. That was the days before mediation. So we tried them. I would go to court 3 or 4 nights before, and I would pretend like I was the plaintiff, and I would research the plaintiff's side. Then the next night I would go and pretend I was the attorney for the defendant, and I would get cases for that side to see. Then they would come. A few brought lawyers, and I would listen to the lawyers. But if they didn't, I at least had some general idea of what justice would be.
Was small claims court one day a week, or how often was it convened?
At first, it was convened as needed, but then it was, I didn't like that because it was any time of day. So I took Friday, and I said every Friday would be. And if any extended over, it would be the following Monday. So that's what we did. But then it did extend over. We had to use Harold Smith's big courtroom in there.
Was there an unforgettable person or persons that you encountered during your career?
Well, yes, there were, but I want to finish about the judge thing.
Sure.
So after a while then I had to run because it was an office that you run for. So I ran and I defeated my opposition. And then they were talking about they were going to raise the jurisdiction again. And I thought that was sort of ridiculous. But anyway, that they're going to do that again, so it would be even more. So the legislature then came along and said, what we're going to do, we're going to do all the jurisdictions different in Florida. When I started practicing, the county judge handled all probate, which is, could go up into the big dollars. The county judge handled all probate, as well as all juvenile cases. So he really had his hand full, as well as all the local stuff. Really had his hands full. And saw a lot of litigation, and Dick Stanley was doing that. It was also where the records were kept. Dick Stanley in the county judge's office had the vault to keep everything. The circuit judge didn't have the vault. It was in the county judge's quarters. So when they decided to redo the Constitution in the 60s, then by virtue of that Constitution, I became the county judge, is what happened. And that's how I was introduced to lots and loads of litigation. But I had lovely quarters. Dick had a nice long table there. You had the vault. You had more employees than the circuit judge had. It was it was a busy place. Anything to determine whether or not you were sane or not was in the county judge's office.
For how long were you a county judge?
I was a county judge 9.5 years.
You were going
I
to.
ran for circuit judge after that, and I lost. I was the first woman to ever run for either. When I ran for circuit judge to run, we were now no longer in the 19th Circuit, we were now the 20th Circuit. Sarasota got a woman to judge. But I was the first judge then, at that time, between, well, definitely in the 20th Judicial Circuit.
I was going to ask you about a most unforgettable person or character who you encountered during your career.
Okay, it was kind of interesting. While I was small claims judge, the attorney for the school board, I don't know if he got mad and left or they fired him, but one of the two. I really can't recall. They had some disagreement. And so Gracely, you remember Gracely, was on the school board. And he came to me, he says, we have had a discussion and we want to invite you to become our school board attorney. And he says, you will be the one. There are no others that we're going to entertain. And so I was the school board, and I thought, well, I don't know if that's going to be all right to be on this, doing all these judicial things as school, not school board, but as small claims judge. So I went to see our judge. What was his name? That's Gerald. To see Judge Gerald to ask about the ethics of it. He says, I see no conflict whatsoever. He says, how could the school board possibly have any conflict at all if you are that, or vice versa? He said, Lynn, don't worry about it. Do it. So at that time then, I was the small claims judge and I was the school board attorney. That was a lot harder job, I'll tell you. And as a matter of fact, it's the hardest job I ever had in my life. I couldn't figure out why. Finally, I figured out why. You're dealing with two of the most sensitive things that a family has. Their money and their children. It's got to be a troublemaker. And I figured that out. And it was the hardest job I ever had. There was something constant. The teachers. Oh, we also had, during that time, we had a strike. I was a school board attorney when they had the strike. Then we had a bond issue, which we passed, which was a real feather in our caps. And it was fun to canvass the votes, too. That was an experience. So that was going along, but then along came the Southern District. We used to be in the Southern District for federal court, not the Middle District, which we are now in federal court. We were, which was, wasn't that stupid, go all the way from Naples to Miami to court when we could drive and be in the middle court. For some political reason, we were in the Southern District. Some lawyer had gone over from Miami to represent somebody in Immokalee. They held court in Immokalee. You also traveled if you were the county judge to Immokalee too. And there was somebody there, a Spanish-speaking person, I don't know if he was Mexican or what, and he did not know any English, he really didn't. And at that time, we had no public defender system whatsoever in the state for anybody, for misdemeanors or in county court. Only in circuit court did we have the public defender system. So the judge ruled, the Southern District judge ruled, and we were the only county in the state that had to do it by order of the federal court, because all the rest of them had no, they didn't have as many Spanish-speaking people as we did either. So, but he ordered that Collier County would supply a public defender system for your county. Once more, the county commission came to me and said, I wasn't a especially good politician, I don't think, but they came and they said, Lynn, we're under order to be a public defender. I said, for the whole county? He says, just misdemeanors and things in the county judges realm, because I'm a small claims judge. I said, well, I think that would be fun. It's a real action, but I don't know if it's really ethical or proper to do all three at the same time. I went to see Judge Gerald again. I told Judge Gerald the problem again. He says, don't worry about it. He says, just say yes. He says, Lynn, forget it. Now, one thing about Judge Gerald, when they were having my activities that I was doing, down when they were having the court in Everglades City, because it was the county seat. And we had to drive, we would pass Judge Gerald all the way down, and all of us from Naples, to go to Everglades City to have court. And then we'd pass each other going back. He called me one day, he says, Lynn, I need a clerk in Collier County. He says, I need one. He says, I don't mean a clerk, he says, because we've got a clerk. He says, I mean somebody to handle things that are going on in Collier County. And he says, I was thinking about you. I said, well, how can I have cases and argue them before you, and yet I am the one that would have the files for you here? And we met down on 3rd Street where it was one of my husband's father's drugstores, but turned into be someone bought it for a real estate office, and then it's right on the corner of Broad and 3rd. So that old wooden building there, and that's where Judge Gerald held court for these certain things that he had. So I would have what it was when I didn't keep the files either. I know I didn't. But that's another thing. While the files were in Everglades City, and while Ed Scott was the clerk of courts, any lawyer could go there and check out the file and keep it several days or a week if you wanted to. So that, yes, and there was never a complaint about a paper of anything or anything that was not right going on. It was total 100% trust. And then we would take it back. They did have a vault in Everglades City to put the vault back in the vault. Also along those lines, when we did get some law books in a little library up here next to Harold Smith's office, that was left open at night. And I would come up a lot of times at night. It was left open. We never had, it was open 24 hours a day. The sheriff's office was below. We never had the first book taken. Never had anybody that even tried to get in, and it was open. Now, you ask about how law was practiced. That's how it was practiced.
Is there anyone that you considered to be a mentor to you when you were practicing, starting out?
I guess my husband, who graduated after I did.
There are not a lot of people to ask questions of, I guess.
No, I guess my Uncle Zach. My Zach Douglas was my father's brother. He was a rather well-known criminal attorney in Gainesville and in Jacksonville. And there was one from the Tampa area who was a well-known criminal lawyer. And he told me he had 72 capital cases, and never lost one to the chair. He had a fantastic reputation. I would call him occasionally to ask him what to do. He was the one that when I first was made a small claim judge, Harold Smith made a big thing out of it. He called the bar. I didn't know this. He said, I want you to come out we're going to do your investiture out at in my courtroom. So he called the president of the bar then, who was Bob McDaniel, came out, and I wore some colorful clothes, after all you want to be seen when you're having your investiture. I got out there, and lo and behold, every single member of the bar was there. Every single member of the bar was there. And he had Bob McDaniel enter the courtroom and I had my arm like he was escorting me to be married down to there, and Harold stood behind the desk all the lawyers were there while I took the oath.
That must have been a pretty memorable experience.
That was memorable. And that's then when Harold asked me, he says, Lynn, you look very nice in your beautiful suit, but he says, I think it would be better if you wore the robe, like all the rest of us. I thought that was sort of pretentious. You know, small claims, a little pretentious. And I tried very hard not to, but just to be everyday stuff. And I called my uncle about that, because I didn't know if I was going to obey Harold or not. So he told me, he says, Lynn, yes. He says, that robe that you're wearing is not in any pretentious manner at all. He says, that is evidence of title. And he says, you're lawyers, you have certain degrees, you have experience, plus you have a title. You are a member of the judiciary. And he says that is evidence of title. He says it adds to the feeling of the entire system. He says, I think Judge Smith is right. He says you should wear it. So I did. I did when I became the county judge, when all the juvenile stuff went back to circuit court, you know, like it is now. When Harold Smith appointed me as the first chief judge under the system, and also that I was to handle all juvenile matters as acting circuit judge, and that to be, and I did, I obeyed him then.
What advice would you have for young lawyers just starting out?
Be computer savvy.
And if you had it to do all over again, would you do anything differently, or would you do it the same?
I would learn the computer. I'll tell you, I think the bar's got to face something. I know they have this, what do they call it? Initiative Vision 2016, you know, where they're looking into the education, let's see, technology, education, bar admissions, and how to enforce it. I think there are 4 things they're looking into. I think there's something else they need to look into. My experience is that most lawyers, my age or younger, they have their secretaries be very computer savvy. They have, what do we call them, the assistants,
Paralegals?
Paralegals, right. Paralegals, where they now have certain things in order to become a true paralegal. They have to have certain experiences and skills. I think that's an excellent idea, but I think they should limit strongly what they do and they don't do. But I think it's an excellent, the same as doctors have nurses to give the shots and so forth. But I think some of the decision-making about what they do, they should keep in their not judicial, but in their attorney position. But I think it is excellent what they're doing. I don't know what they're doing about technology for the older one, because I'm telling you, none of us really know how to do it. My grandson at age 4, when I retired, sort of from law, you know, doing a lot, closed my office, I decided that I would substitute in the school system, because along the way I'd gone ahead and gotten my teacher's certificate. I decided when I retired I wanted to teach law or something in it, and I felt I needed something. So I went back and got the teaching certificate so I know what to do. So I thought, well, I will take that and learn what to do. And I don't think it really helped an awful lot. It did. But I became a substitute from pre-kindergarten through 12th grade. I walked into the pre-kindergarten, those are 4 years old before they go to real kindergarten, 4-year-old. I see computers in the room. They had 4 computers. All the boys were at their computer. Click, 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 click. They can't read. They cannot read. But they know how to operate this thing and how to get answers. Pictures come on. Click, click. They knew exactly what to do. I was flabbergasted. And I thought, I can't do that. But something that does not change. All the little girls were peering over their shoulders at the little boys. When the boys got through, they closed it down, they got up, something else. Then the little girls could get the computers. I noticed that hasn't changed at all.
What are your thoughts about lawyer advertising?
I think it should be barred. Unequivocally. Without question. I saw an ad the other day that I thought, my goodness, this is terrible. I don't wonder why the bar doesn't do a little more about it. There was a client, the picture with the ad was this. He was telling the public how he had this lawyer he was straightforward, and he found that he was honest, and he said, why he treated us just like family. He said he had integrity, and he says, which a lot of them out there in this field don't. I think that is an out and out huge affront to the whole profession. I really do. Don't you think that's bad? I think it's bad. And, people learn a lot of bad information over television through just such stuff. I think it's terrible.
Wow.
One thing that the bar has not done, they're not doing much for those over 60, 65 that don't want to do computer stuff and don't seem really to have the capability to learn it too well. The bar, there's a lot of good knowledge and experience, just wisdom, After all, I told my grandson that he's got a little smart alecky, and I said, well, he's over with his mother and father now, who's over at Oxford. He's offered a chair at Oxford. And my daughter just got her thing in long-term care for the elderly. And so he's at this school over at Oxford now, and he said something about, oh, well, American schools. I said, now, just a minute. I said, I may not have been to a European or to an Oxford school or anything, or a Cambridge. But I said, I'm just about 1 year from 90, because I'm 88 going on 89. And I said, when you get 100, you're wise, you've got wisdom. You don't have to go to all those schools. And he sort of, you're how old, Grandma? To him, he thought, can I help you down the stairs? I'm getting more respect now.
Tell us a little bit about, you had a unique vehicle for a number of years. Tell us about that.
Oh, well, I got that because every car I got, it seemed to be a bummer, a living. Just one after another. So I decided I'm going to get me what the taxi cab car. So I found out they made them up in Michigan. And I called them and I asked, where could get one, because I wanted one, because they must last a long time, because they drive them, it seems like forever. And he said, the reason they do, and I talked to the guy at the factory where they make them in Michigan. He said, we take the best parts of the cars that we find, like he says, we use the turbo for the shift, or this and that, the best parts of each one and put in that. And he says, we don't change. He says, the die for the outside of it, they stay the same. So we don't have to invest a lot into changing the die for all these fenders and everything. We just take that fender off and put another one. Taxi cabs could keep going in their cars. Just order a fender, order a top. They come and they're gone. You know, they're back to work again. And he says now there's only one man that I know of in Miami that sells them. And he said, I'm going to give you his name and address, and he has them in stock. And he says, by the way, we've only sold 5,000 new ones in Florida. So I went to see the man over in Miami, and I bought one from here and him, and I got delivered a new one. I said, I want a new one. I don't want any that have been fixed up. That's how I got it. And it was, you could take barrels of anything. I could put trucks in there. It was wonderful. It was wonderful. The only thing is that the gas mileage was terrible. I got 10 miles to the gallon.
Lynn, I don't know whether they're that interested, but the lawyers who came to practice here found out about a thing called the Ochapi rules that Harold Smith used to use. I mean, he would say, all you need to practice law is...
Oh, what Harold would say, well, I think he got the idea a little bit from Judge Jolly, really. But,
Right.
you know, we only those one of those we do things according to Hoyle, is that Harold said he thought law libraries were superfluous. He really did. He said all you really need to practice law is, let's see how he put that, you needed Shakespeare, what was it?
The Florida statutes.
What was it?
The Florida statutes.
The Florida, you needed the Florida statute, Shakespeare, and the Bible.
Yeah, the Bible.
And the Bible. That was it. And I smiled to myself when they named the county commission as an honor to Harold. Had named it the Harold Smith Law Library. It was really funny.
Yeah, that was an inside joke.
It was really, well, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, most people didn't know then. The
No,
inside
you don't have to print all that. That's being deficient or something. But I do think that the bar should address the wisdom of the older lawyers, of those past 65 or so, who really don't want to become, they still want to do things themselves, but they don't want to become it like e-filing and, you know, all that stuff. I almost went and hung up my license the first time I tried to e-file. I thought, well, I said, it's that or me, I've got to do it. So I hired a paralegal to come over and show me how to do it.
More than one way to skin a cat. Thank you very much, Lynn. Anybody else have any?
But there must be some way you could harness the wisdom of this, maybe even another category or something.
We'll have to figure it out.
You know?
Maybe the ends of
The
court
vision-
people will come up with
Yeah,
something.
Vision 2016, I think, should broaden its vision a little bit to take in what technology has brought in a lot, but you don't want to do away with all this wisdom and knowledge of what to do in certain situations that have been done, which you do run across. You can't help but run across it if you survive, you know. So there must be something, maybe call it the 90s, the 80s category or something.
Oh,
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.